Does anybody want to paint?
How is everyone? Today we're going to go through the process of scumbling and glazing. After we've applied our scumbling and we've got uniform application of lights and darks, and because in this case our ground is our midtone, we take our glaze, which is diluted with matte medium, and we're just going to glaze over everything except for our strongest highlights and our strongest midtones. On this first stage actually too, as I'm doing this, I'm noticing how much the glaze is locking our palette in together. So in some cases, like, what are my strongest highlights? They're probably not on the paper bag because the paper bag is absorbing light. It's not reflecting off of it. The coffee pot is glass, so that would be reflecting light. The cast iron is metallic, so that would be reflecting light. So there might be some areas I want to preserve on there, but otherwise I'm going to lock it all in together. And I said that we weren't going to glaze over our darks. It kind of seems inconsequential in terms of the application, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you feel like your glaze is a little too a little too thin, you can add more pigment to it, but just do it incrementally. Because I'm satisfied with how this is locking together, but I feel like in terms of mileage, this could lock together faster. So I've just added a little bit more pigment. Yeah, that makes a difference. So it's unifying the color too. Now everything feels like it's the same kind of caramel orange. Applying the glaze in a uniform vertical brush stroke, whichever direction you decide to apply it in, just stay consistent. Your glaze has to be completely dry before you scumble. So we do have a hair dryer. Use that, speed up your process so that you don't lose time. And once you have completed your glaze, wash the brush out really well too. Once you've completed the glaze, you're ready to scumble again. This is probably an exciting part because you're going to end up projecting color into this. So we want to get away from it being strictly monochromatic, but we're not covering anything up. That's the process with scumbling and glazing, is that you're preserving lower layers and working with them. I've mixed a green here using yellow and blue, of course. Now this green, yes, it's green, but is it sophisticated? Does it have depth? Does it have interest to it? So in order to bring that interest, I'm actually going to go across the color wheel, get the tiniest bit of red. You see how it's just on the corner of the brush. And I'm going to mix that in just to make it a little bit more complex. I'm also going to reach for a little bit of white. It's kind of a lot. And more yellow. Instead of treating white as the only way of lightening your colors, instead think about the color spectrum. If I have two ingredients for green and I want to mix a lighter green, reach towards yellow. After you add white to it, it makes it pastel. So if you want to increase the saturation, boost the saturation back to it, get more yellow. So that brings it back to life. You see how that's a little bit brighter? This is a green that I feel like has a little bit more depth to it, mostly thanks to the presence of the red. So I'm going to dust it off so that I have just a dry brush here. And as I apply the green, I want to be careful not to obscure everything that I have already done. I want to keep the ground. I want to keep some of the highlights. It's just I'm trying to send areas towards green. I didn't paint very much of this, but it feels like it's much more green than it was. So it's kind of a little goes a long way. See, on this highlighted area, I only added green to the sides, and it ends up giving the impression that the center is glowing, or the side is glowing a little bit more. This green, depending on what it's up against, it looks dark, and in other contexts, it looks light. Some of these darker areas on the leaves now, I'm taking the same color and shifting it back towards blue. The reason I personally enjoy this palette setup is because I'm thinking like when I need darker colors, I'm drifting towards my darker colors on the palette. When I need lighter colors, I'm moving towards those lighter colors. When I need warms, I'm moving towards yellow or red, etc. So in trying to mix this darker green, I've moved towards blue, and again, still not getting the depth that I'm looking for, so I'm going to reach across the color wheel and get some red, almost as if I'm sending this towards a purple, but I still want it to be a green that has some depth to it. Now on some of these darker areas, I can go in with this, this deeper green. Some of these areas that are scumbled and are dark, they've already been painted, so there's not that much to do. As you move up in terms of layers, like the next time you scumble, the next time you glaze, there are less and less areas to paint because you've already done so much of the work in the lower layers. So I think a lot of this is going to be disciplining yourself to not paint over what you already have and instead work with it. I'm finding areas where I kind of like got into a trap with the drawing where things like didn't actually happen or they're in the wrong spot. I'm gonna boost some of these greens again even further. So even though I'm painting green leaves, you might be surprised how often I'm reaching towards the red. The green leaves are made more complex by the presence of the red, the complementary color. As you're painting, like try to figure out why the thing that you're seeing exists. Send the metal rim towards gray. Gray is two complementary colors together in equal amounts. And then you kind of add a little bit more blue to continue to neutralize it. And this doesn't have to be perfectly neutral because it's going to be influenced by its surroundings, of course. On some of these pre-established highlights, I'm going back in with a almost like a soft lime green, just to add more vitality and life. You're working with what is underneath. So you'd get a lot of mileage out of some of these subtle additions. Now we're ready to glaze again. And I'm gonna leave behind the strongest highlights. Now it's best to only do your glazing when you've completed an entire layer. If this were my actual painting, I would not be glazing right now. The reason is I have not addressed the entire surface of the painting with scumbling. I have areas that have not been dealt with, and that would create an imbalance. You also get a sense why it becomes imperative to go back and forth with this process. Also why you wouldn't glaze over everything each time you glaze, because it does send areas back. All right, now we would be ready to scumble again, and it's a back and forth. You work in smaller and smaller areas. Once you do another pass on scumbling, you do another pass on glazing, and back and forth until you find that the results you're looking for are there in front of you on the canvas. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in person, or you can email me, and you can always refer back to this video as necessary. All right, see you tomorrow.